Just a little warning for all of you. I'm going to need a little bit of grace because after watching through all of the X-Men movies and being, what's a nice way for saying radically disappointed by pretty much all of them, I didn't trust past John. I don't think he had good taste. I'm learning that about myself. So needless to say, I was very worried starting Deadpool because 15-year-old John really liked Deadpool. That was his jam, probably to a concerning degree. That's not the point. I remember my dad took me to see this movie in theaters as a surprise because I didn't think I was going to get to see it because it's not at all good for a 15-year-old to see. But that experience was so important to me. Seeing that with my dad is one of my favorite memories with him from my whole life so far. He's alive. He's still going. So you're just going to have to put up with me just exuberantly talking about Deadpool for probably 10 to 12 minutes, because this movie's great. Hey, what's up? My name is John Bonjour. I'm an artist and a film enthusiast. I have drawn some art, and I would like to enthuse about some film, not a recent film, a film from 2016, as we're gearing up for Deadpool and Wolverine, my most anticipated movie of this year. Sorry, Dune Part 2, you were so close. You were so close. Also, Hellboy's coming out. There's a lot. It's a good year, honestly. The point is we have a new Deadpool movie coming out, and I think it'd be fun because I never got a chance to review those movies because I wasn't doing a channel when I was 15. So I think it'd be fun to review those movies coming up. I watched all the X-Men, did a little video on that. You can find that on my channel. I also wanted to go through and review the Deadpool movies. So we are starting with 2016's Deadpool. It was directed by Tim Miller and stars obviously Ryan Reynolds and the weird guy. What's his name? Not Josh Gad. And Morena Baccarin, who is incredible. She's also in Firefly. There's really not a lot I have to say that's complaining about this movie. This will probably be a spoiler-filled review because it came out in 2016. So if you haven't seen it yet, that's not on me. That's on you. But yeah, I don't have a lot of negatives to say. If I have anything, it's just that I'm not super big into Weasel's character. He's kind of annoying to me. TJ Miller. His name is TJ Miller. I'm not super big on him in this movie. His whole, whatever, fucked or whatever joke is not that funny. It's funny the first time. The topographical map of Utah is pretty good, I'm not gonna lie. After that, you get kind of tired of these jokes, and they really only have the one kind of joke for that character. I think TJ Miller's a pretty funny guy. I'm pretty sure he might also be a terrible person. I couldn't tell you, never met the guy. But I think he's comedically talented, and this does not really show that off. He has a couple of funny moments, and it's not great. Otherwise, though, this is just a rock-solid movie. I really was surprised going into this. I had some fears that A, maybe the CGI wasn't going to hold up, and B, the comedy and some of the more childish elements, because that's a part of the movie, were going to be the most prominent thing that were in it, and not really a heart and a story. I couldn't have been more wrong. The heart of this film is so strong. That's something that I wasn't prepared for, something I didn't really appreciate as a kid. Vanessa and Wade's relationship in this movie is really solid and very heart-wrenching. I feel genuinely bad for a comic book character named Deadpool who talks to me. It's not me specifically, but it's amazing that they're able to develop this character in such a way that I find him emotionally interesting and I care about his relationship. And again, getting Morena Baccarin to be this character, to play Vanessa, she does such a good job. Their back and forth is so funny. They have great chemistry. It's just a really solid building. It reminds me actually a lot of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. That kind of lives and dies on whether or not you buy Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's relationship. But this is the same deal. This is a movie that claims to be a love story, which is a funny little joke when he's stabbing a guy. But it's also kind of true, which is crazy to me. This is not a movie that has to be that deep or that solid, but it has a better emotional arc than most to all of the DCU movies. Another thing I do appreciate about this movie, I mentioned being concerned about the CGI not holding up. Generally speaking, I really think it does. I think it does a very good job. I know that it's a relatively smaller budget movie for as far as superhero movies go. I think they do a very good job putting the budget where it needs to be. The big action scenes are big and exciting, but they're also not so big that you feel like they're stretching past their limits. It's gunplay, it's hand-to-hand, it's all very achievable in camera, barring Colossus and some of the flips and Negasonic Teenage Warhead. Obviously, there's things that you can't do in camera, but I do feel like they did the majority of the stunts and the work in camera, and it makes it more believable. It feels stronger. Not to mention you have very solid choreography. I feel like we get in this space with the superhero world where most of the characters just kind of fight the exact same way. They have little moves that they do, but otherwise they all do the same kind of punches, especially after, Captain America Winter Soldier. Like, that became the way that you fight in a superhero movie. I really appreciate that Deadpool fights in a way that you would if you could not die. Like, if your body could not be permanently hurt, you would just be throwing your limbs around. And I think that's really fun that he's not so much precision technique. He is good at those things, but a lot of the fighting that he does is just sort of launching his whole mass at someone. And I think that's an incredibly fun way to handle this character, something that I probably wouldn't have thought of. You think of these guys with all the guns and the pouches strapped to them as being perfect shots, exceptional with a blade, always being, the upper hand, always having the cool move, the cool fight sequence. And that is kind of true of Deadpool. I love that there's so much more to this. He is just kind of a guy. He doesn't suddenly become great at fighting. You can believe that he was a special forces guy, and now he's just using his powers to his advantage. I did mention Colossus a second ago, and he's so wonderful. He's so great. His interaction with Deadpool is, they knew that they struck gold because they brought him back for the second one. Same with Negasonic Teenage Warhead. But they really did strike gold. They were not wrong about that. It's fun to have a big CGI Colossus the way he's supposed to be. This is an extremely comic book movie while also remaining grounded, and I think Colossus is a perfect example of that. Also, he just looks great. The CGI for Colossus is extremely solid. I do have one thing that's kind of a half praise, half nitpick, which is Ajax, the villain. I can't tell if I like him or not. I've seen this movie a lot, and originally I really hated him in the good way. I liked his character as a villain. He was a very hateable guy, and I appreciated that about him. After watching it more, I think you start to see how flat some of his character is. He's just kind of an evil guy doing evil guy things, and we never really get a huge motivation for that. I'm okay with that. Honestly, I care more about Deadpool and his portrayal. Ajax is just something for him to go up against. Same thing with Angel Dust. It's like, she's fine. She's all right. She's a big, strong lady. There's some fun jokes around her, but neither of them are strong enough characters to be the villain in a story that really needs a good villain. Thankfully, this version of Deadpool isn't necessarily one of those. He's got enough random enemies that he can take out, and they're bad enough that you care whether or not they die. I think that's all you really need in those characters, but that is kind of a small thing that I'm not super in love with about this movie. I don't find him to be that engaging of a villain outside of just, he kind of sucks. Now, rounding up my thoughts on Deadpool, I have one more thing that I need to talk about, and I think it kind of connects with the new Deadpool as well as Deadpool 2. The fourth wall breaking. I have extremely mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I understand that it is intrinsic to his character, and for that reason, I love that it's there. I think that's great. I also think that they do it, generally speaking, pretty well. I think the majority of the fourth wall breaks are solid and funny and creative and pretty short-lived, so they don't really mess with the story too much. That said, there's another side to those, and I kind of worry about it, because as much as I do appreciate the heart of this movie, you kind of lose it when Deadpool acknowledges that it's a movie. Maybe not for everybody, but I found that the moments that I was most invested in this film is when he wasn't breaking the fourth wall. I think when this movie decides to breathe a little in its own space and actually be a film, it's really solid, and I care very much about it. And then by nature of the thing, it has to kind of poke fun at that and say, oh, what a bad guy, and he's a funny, quirky guy. I get that that's part of it, but you do kind of bring yourself out of the fiction a little bit when you point out that it's fiction. And I say this not as much to critique this movie as I am worried about Deadpool and Wolverine. I know She-Hulk also broke the fourth wall quite a bit, and I think they used that in a really creative way that had a really funny ending, something that I was completely not expecting and really enjoyed. Yes, I know that's a hot take. I just don't care. But She-Hulk had the decency to end the show by closing up whatever rift it was that allowed her to break through the fourth wall. But I'm a little bit nervous that that's going to break some of the fiction of the MCU, something they've worked extremely hard to build, to the point that we have YouTubers making extremely in-depth, well-crafted videos about the presidents of the MCU. That's crazy to me that we care so much about this world that we'll deep dive into it like that. My concern is that Deadpool pointing out all of the MCU-isms of the MCU is just going to be another level of the he's right behind me, isn't he kind of joke. I hope that that's not true, but that is my greatest worry about Deadpool 3, is that they're going to take that and run too far with it. That's going to be his whole character, where I think something that's so strong about this first movie is that it has a heart. If Deadpool and Wolverine can match the heart level of the first Deadpool movie and the second Deadpool movie, but we'll get to that later, I will be extremely happy. I think that's all we need, is for it to be a solid movie and a Deadpool movie on top of that. All that to say, the original Deadpool is fantastic. If you haven't seen it yet and you're looking forward to Deadpool and Wolverine, highly recommend. It's one of my favorite superhero movies, especially after having matured a little bit and understanding film a little bit better. It's not just funny jokes and gory kills. There's more to this movie than I was even prepared for, and I've seen it so many times. I really do love this movie, and I'm so glad that it holds up. Thank you for watching this video and checking out my channel. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on movies, comics, TV shows, fourth wall breaking, and the, general structuring of a universe, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and comment down below what you'd like me to review next. Or do none of those things because I am not your dad.